What's up, interpreters? My name is Harden. I am the president of the International Association of Tour Directors and Guides, better known as IATDG. I also am the president of CE Educational Travel.
What's up, interpreters? This is Heather Minier, and I am the Corporate Engagement and Partnerships Manager.
What is up, interpreters? I am Paul Caputo. I'm the Executive Director with NAI. Vaughn, hello, and thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast.
Thank you for agreeing to have me. I've been begging to be on the podcast.
That's
for
true. There's
years
nothing
now.
you love more than being given a microphone and being asked to speak publicly.
Finally caved and let me be on this.
Finally, we'll let Vaughn Harden on to talk about IATDG and tourism and interpretation. Heather and I have both been to the IATDG conference last year in Denver. We got to go down there. It was right down the street from us, so we got to go talk about interpretation with an audience of tour directors and guides. So I think before we get too deep into this, I would just ask the question, what is this profession of tour directing and guiding?
Tour directing and guiding is an awesome, very little known profession in the travel industry. So basically, you think about some of the biggest tour companies in the world or in the country, like Globus and Colette and Tauk and Adventures by Disney and World Strides and EF Tours. These are huge travel companies that put together groups of people to travel to different destinations. And they hire people called tour directors. So a tour director is someone who is almost like a personal concierge for a tour group, right? So these companies hire these people to be the face of their company out on the road. So these tours, we call these tours over the road tours, and the tour directors travel with the group every day. So they meet them where the tour starts and they travel with them every day. Sometimes the tours are 3 days, sometimes they are 20 days. And this person is with them every day, checking them into the hotels, giving them commentary on the road, checking them into the restaurants, leading them into the attractions and that sort of thing. And then, of course, dealing with any issues that may arise on the tour. And a tour guide, of course, is a person who a little bit different from a tour director. Tour directors are usually very long-term throughout the duration of the trip. And a tour guide, at least as we define them, are typically more local. So they may step onto a tour for an hour or 4 hours or for the day while that person is at the destination or while the person is at that particular attraction or that particular site. And they give them commentary specifically about that place.
Heather, I'm jumping the gun here. I know we're supposed to ping back and forth, but I do have a follow-up to that question, which is obviously for the purposes of the relationship that NAI and IATDG have with one another, and the reason why we might ask you to be on this podcast finally is what is that relationship between tour directing and guiding and interpretation? Where is the overlap between those two fields in your mind?
So in my mind, I think that tour directors have a lot that they can learn from interpreters about how they tell stories, and how they bring a site or an attraction or art or whatever it may be to life to a group, right? Basically, how they interpret that thing to a group. And I think that from what I've seen in tour directors and also just regular guys, but more so tour directors, there's so much to learn and the art of that and the art of bringing a place or a person or a thing to life for a guest. And I think for interpreters, our tour directors can teach them a lot about travel and about the career of sort of the over the road piece, sort of the customer service piece that goes into, this area of travel, which is where our people specialize. Not to say that there's some that are not great storytellers, but I think there's a little piece that could be missing or that is often missed in storytelling and truly connecting someone to a person, place, or thing.
I guess I'm kind of curious, Vaughn, you've been in this industry for a really long time, the tourism directing
Hmm.
and guiding.
Hmm.
Have you seen an evolution with this profession? And
You
what does
know,
that look like?
it's interesting. I've seen what would be the opposite of an evolution? I don't
Um,
know.
A
hmm,
devolution.
a
Regression. Yeah, yeah,
devolution.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yes,
yeah. A
exactly.
devolution. Yeah, it's interesting. What
Deterioration.
a deterioration or deterioration might sound harsh. It may, yeah, I wouldn't say that, but let me explain. So prior to the pandemic, when I first came into this specific aspect of the industry, well, with tour directors and tour guides, there seemed to be a lot more tour directors and tour guides out on the road. So basically, back then there was a situation where you had a lot of tour directors and guides competing heavily for the jobs from tour operators. After the pandemic, those tables turned, where operators are now competing very heavily for tour directors and for tour guides, more so tour directors, I would say. So I don't know exactly what happened. I think a lot of people, obviously during the pandemic, travel was grounded. So people had to go, people who did this profession or, mostly full time, they had to go and find a way to feed their families because they couldn't travel. So I think a lot of people left the industry and they did not return. And what we're trying to do now, I mean, our biggest mission has been to sort of repopulate the industry with tour directors because, I guess from the overall state of tourism now, but from what I've seen as a student tour operator, tours are stronger than they were before. I mean, people used to talk about revenge travel and, travel is back. And I do think there was a period where you know, that was heightened, but I think now it's sort of leveled off, but still probably a little bit stronger than it was even prior to the pandemic for a lot of different reasons, especially today. So I say that to say we lost a lot of people during the pandemic and they didn't return. And it's very interesting because tour operators are struggling to find people to work, which is another reason, I think it's good for us to connect because this is a potential opportunity for interpreters. Other things I've seen as when I talk about a deterioration or whatever a better word would be there is just, and I think we touched on it a couple weeks ago when we had
At the Interp
our
talk, I
interp
think
talk.
this is kind of
Exactly.
what I was getting at with this question, honestly.
Yeah. So, we've seen a lot of some things that have not been so positive just as it relates to people. I mean, of course, that's been the case for me just in the world in general. And it's no different in travel, right? We have a lot more people who are, whether it's political reasons or other social, cultural reasons, people are not as gracious, they're not as kind, they're not as tolerant. They're not as understanding. They're a lot more feel a lot more entitled. And I think people have probably already maybe have been this way, right? But I think now it seems to be a lot more acceptable, right? So I say that. I think also sort of a separate point is that people have a lot more information at their fingertips with social media and, of course, I mean, not that people didn't have phones before the pandemic. It wasn't that long ago, but where people have all these tools but what they do have is technology that wasn't as readily available, like Chat GPT, for example, where you would ask a question and it would give you a very, very detailed answer. So people have that. So you challenge a lot of tour directors and you challenge a lot of the tour guides. And the people in our profession have to be very much on their toes with this information that they're giving, which is another reason I think interpretation is so important because it's not just giving information, it's a skill at bringing this place to life or making this thing real or connecting people, which is something that, at least right now, Chat GPT can't do.
So if I'm an interpreter
Mm-hmm.
and I'm interested in this profession where there's certainly plenty of overlap, right? Like there's a lot of introducing visitors or guests to a place and telling stories in a way that fosters connections. If my training is in interpretation, suppose I've been working for a government agency and I am interested in becoming a tour director or a tour guide, where are the areas where I need to focus on professional development? What are the skills that I don't have if I'm really good at telling stories, giving tours, creating programs, but I have never directed a group of folks who are piling onto a bus for my weekend long trip?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, a lot more on the technical side, on the customer service side, for sure. The group management side. So it's one thing to, talk to a group or do interpretation at a site for a group, but also having that, managing that group over a week or over 2 weeks, right? Moving that group from place to place, understanding the dynamics with a group of people long term and how they interact with you, how they interact with each other, and sort of managing that. So again, and then again, of course, like I said, the technical aspects of, checking people into a hotel and moving the bags on and off the coach. And while it sounds very simple, there's certainly some skill in how this is done effectively and efficiently because you're managing time and with in the relationship with the driver and all of these things that is on a tour. If you take a tour with your family or with your significant other, this is something that you probably wouldn't even notice on a group tour that has to be done in order for the tour to go smoothly. So learning those aspects of group management, people management, and the technical aspects of every piece of the tour, the things you need to do to call ahead to make sure that as a guest on a tour, you don't notice any hiccup or this thing goes off without a hitch because behind the scenes at every turn there's a potential problem, there's a potential hiccup, and the tour director has to be there to make sure that no one sees that.
One of the differences I think that's really interesting between interpretation and tourism, and you sort of alluded to it, talking about the length of time that trip exists.
Hmm.
I'm curious for interpreters, what opportunities are there to develop more in-depth messages, maybe multiple themes over the course of a certain number of days, when you have a group for 3, 4, 5 days a week, that sort of thing, right? Like, are there more opportunities to develop deeper or more messages as an interpreter over that longer time frame?
I think so because you're not just with the group at a particular site, obviously, or any site, no matter how many sites there are. You're also with this group in transition. So you may be with them as they travel from, for example, Washington, D.C. to New York.
Mhm.
So there's an opportunity there to establish these conversations and establish these relationships with people. And you could be, interpreting whether it's something that they may see on the road or whether you're interpreting something a little bit more philosophical or whether it's something political or whatever the case may be. I mean, of course, with political, you have to be careful, which is also an interesting skill. But whatever that thing may be, whatever that conversation may be, whatever that story is that you're telling at that time, there's so much more opportunity for that to happen over the course of those days, right? Over the course of a long road trip, or the course of one of the 6 or 7 or however many dinners you have together with these folks. There's always an opportunity to do it. Of course, you don't want to overdo it. People want their time and their space just to live and think, but certainly a lot more opportunity to do that in every different moments of the tour.
I was just thinking about this because I hadn't before, where you definitely could like change your program a little bit, right? Depending on as you get to know people. It's not quite dialogic interpretation at that point, but like you can definitely, maybe cater your tour a little bit, right? To once you get to know people. And then it made me think, fun, do tour directors and maybe guides to get information about their audience prior to getting there? Like, is there like a questionnaire beforehand so that you're kind of getting to know the guests?
That's a good question, Heather. I would assume some may do this, but to that point, I mean, that's a very interesting thing that I would probably bring up at the conference, actually. Is this something that they're doing? I know for student operators, typically not, because
Hmm.
you are dealing with students, with young people, and as student operator, you're not really having a ton of interaction or personal interaction in that way with students. Use more of the chaperones.
Hmm.
But we give, for example, a little bit of demographic background, but it's very high level. It's not, anything detailed about the person or their life. But it's actually a good point. I mean, that's certainly something that could be that probably should be happening on adult tours. I don't know if that's the case. But something that you mentioned made me think about, other opportunities where, let's say, for example, we were on a tour of Jamaica this week, right? And now, well, I mean, with hurricanes a little different.
Oh,
You
yeah.
have an expect, where it's coming. But if you're in a situation where there's a natural disaster or some sort of traumatic event, like a mass shooting or something like that that happens, there's an opportunity there as a part of that tour to address to talk about that, to address that issue and to get the people involved. And of course, the more you know about them, you can have an idea of how you want to tweak it. But again, that's a very professional level of tour directing that I think that interpretation can offer our folks. So the question that Paul asked earlier about, how, that is the type of thing that I think is is a level up. Of course, we're not hoping for anything out of the ordinary to happen. We're hoping that things go right and go smooth. But there could be something like that that happens, or not even anything of that magnitude. It could be something that happens with some people on the tour. Maybe someone proposes, or something else happens that's great or not so terrible. But there's an opportunity to create that kind of moment on the tour. And I think the skills that you all offer as interpreters is what would be necessary in order to take advantage of those opportunities.
As you're talking just about kind of the interpreters or the tour directors and guides, what what do you see as skills that are really important for this kind of work? Or
Um,
characteristics of a person, or is that not necessarily needed? You can obviously learn some of these things, but I'm just kind of curious if there are certain kind of skills or characteristics that you're looking for when you hire directors and guides. And I imagine those are maybe two different skill sets.
I think that it could vary by the operator and the type of tours that they're doing or the type of tours they're hiring for. I can say for us, we look for some as a tour operator, not as IATDG. As a tour operator, I'm looking for someone who we work with a lot of first generation or who would be students who would be first generation college students.
Hmm.
So these are students who are oftentimes from disadvantaged backgrounds. So we look for people who may have experience with working with those type of communities, or who, what we know from from their personality or from their background or what they've told us in an interview would be, where that would be a positive experience. It wouldn't be something that would be they'd be so detached from different people from different type of backgrounds or cultures or communities and
Mhm.
that sort
Oh,
of
I
thing.
see.
So someone we
Right.
feel could be able to connect with that, or just if we talk a little bit more generally, someone who'd be able to connect more with students, because while I mentioned we don't have a lot of direct interaction with students, there are going to be those opportunities where your kids are going to see you as the leader and they may ask you a question or whatever the case may be. So someone who has a passion for working with student groups, someone who has a passion for travel, because again, travel is obviously, as travel is the main part of what's happening here while we're on this tour. but you also have to be connected to the purpose because the purpose is to bring exposure to the students who we're traveling with, right? So travel gets old because a lot of problems happen with travel. You get tired of traveling, believe it or not. And it has to be something more than that to kind of keep you connected. So I think that type of stuff is important. But again, with an adult group, I think they're probably looking for and a lot, oftentimes, I think with the adult travel, most of the adult travel companies work with seniors. So in that same way, right, you have to have someone who's going to be, maybe more patient or more understanding in these different situations and who can connect on that way. You wouldn't hire someone fresh out of college to work with the senior group from Talc. Talc is a very high end, I'm just using it as an example, a high end tour company. So you want to have someone who can connect with that population. But I think being organized, making sure that you are very proactive in your preparation, being very personable because you're dealing with students, of course. You're dealing with people, of course. And yeah, just I think having a good work ethic on the road, someone who can think on their feet, that's super important because things happen all the time that cause the itinerary and the plans to change. But yeah, I think those are a couple of things that are important.
So NAI and IATDG are working on some things together. We're going to get to go to Arizona. We have a joint study group tour of some sites in Arizona. Pink Jeep Tours is sponsoring an event during that event. So super looking forward to that. The idea is that we're going to throw interpreters and tour guides in together. We've had other things going on, ways that we have partnered. You all have been to the NAI conference, presented sessions at the NAI conference. I'm going to be giving an address at the IATDG conference, which is the week after the NAI conference in Baltimore, just up the road from Virginia Beach, November 17 through 21. So if you're going to the NAI conference, follow me to IATDG afterwards as well. So, but obviously, our organizations are doing a lot together. I'm excited about all the things that we have coming up, though I'm a little bit nervous about just being handed a microphone and told go for 50 minutes. So it's I'm not
Yeah.
sure if you guys know what you're getting yourselves into with that. So
No, yeah, I think it'll be great because to your point, it is so much on both sides and just a lot of career opportunities for both people, new career opportunities in the same space, but just new opportunities, which I think, right now is super important because career opportunities seem to be hard to come by and they're reducing every day. So this is certainly something that I think is a benefit to everybody who participates.
all right, Vaughn, I have one last question for you, and this is an important one. This is a big one.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. I have an idea for a retirement job for me someday,
Yes.
where I am going to provide niche tours of minor league baseball cities and ballparks. So during the baseball season, we'll have like 4 or 5 days where we're going to go to a different ballpark and a different game every single day, and then we'll experience those cities when we're not going to be at the ball games. And so I guess my question is, on a scale of extremely rich to rich beyond my wildest dreams, how rich am I going to be with this idea?
Well, that's a good question. And I can tell you that if the majority of the population is like me and hate baseball,
Ah,
you're gonna be a poor man. However, if you change it just a little tweak,
all
just
right,
a
little
little
tweak.
tweak, and you take them to, I don't know if there's minor league football. It's not a thing.
That's called
So
college.
let's go. Let's go college. Maybe you're right. Maybe you stick to the minor league. But no, seriously, I think that is a very good niche. I think I have not heard of anyone doing this. And I think if you can find a way to make it profitable to do this, and there's a guy, for example, in Baltimore, and I can't think of his name, but he is all about the Baltimore Orioles. If anyone has any interest, they want to come visit the stadium, he is all about that. He's all about Baltimore. He's all about the Orioles. So he's developed a little piece of heaven for himself there. And baseball, the Orioles are always incorporated. So I think if you can do that in a way where people can visit multiple cities and these little cities, they have an interest in that. I think it could be good. But the honest answer is you're probably going to be poor, and I'll be. I was trying to stretch it and see how we can make you a rich guy by doing this, but I'll be screening your phone calls because you'll be borrowing money
Oh
from.
no, okay. All right.
I have one more question, and it's
Uh,
just because I've been wondering about this, Vaughn. How did
Mhm.
you get into this whole industry?
Well, I started doing tours when I was in college. I would do tours. So I went to an HBCU and Florida A&M. So college HBCU college football is very big, not because the football is great, because the bands are great, right? So we go to
Mhm.
see the band.
mhm.
So we would have these classic games, and it's all about culture. It's not about football at all. It's all about culture and band. So I would do trips to different games, different homecoming games, and different what we call classic games, where you'd play someone kind of outside of your region, but it was a big school against another big school, big relative to HBCU. So I started doing those type of trips, and then I started doing trips, spring break trips for Florida State, which is across the street from FAMU. And so that's how I kind of got started in touring.
Hmm.
And then when I left FAMU, I started doing college visit tours back in Detroit. Then we started to do tours for groups from out of the country. Groups, schools from Mexico were wanting to bring their kids to the U.S. to visit Ivy League schools or to visit schools on the
Oh.
West Coast. And then, of course, while they're there, they want to go and visit all the sites. So
Mhm.
we would do all of that stuff. So that's kind of how we got into doing the DC trips, the New York trips. We did some international stuff, not a ton. So
Oh,
that's
so
how we
that's where
got,
the student tours started.
that's where the student tours started. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so
Interesting.
from there, because we would start to, we started to have more tours, we would need to go on these tours. So we needed to find people, we needed to find tour directors because I couldn't go on all of them. And so we started to try to understand where can we go and we find these tour directors and it was crazy. And then we found an organization out of California, ITMI, that trained tour directors. So we found that and then we started to think about, well, we want to be able to find these tour directors on a website, right? So we pitched the idea. They weren't interested. So we said, we're going to do a website for this. Well, website didn't take off, but we said there's no association for these tour directors. So we started an association. And with the association came the conference. And then we got a site that, kind of came full circle. So
So that's how IATDG started too.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
We wanted to start as a basically almost like what do you call it? A match.com for tour directors and tour operators, right? So that's kind of how that was our main purpose. And then that didn't really happen, but we started with the conference where they could meet each other in person.
So if I was a French major in college
Hmm.
and I've got this interest in minor league baseball and I cater my tours for French-speaking Canadians and people from
Mm.
France touring minor league baseball stadiums.
That's it.
Now,
That's the
now,
money.
there you
Now,
go.
that's
That's
Now
the
where the
you're
money
talking.
is. I'm
money.
Now you're
I
talking.
I'm going to be
There,
rolling in Canadian dollars and French
there,
francs. French francs,
there.
which they haven't spent there in 30
I
years,
was
right?
gonna say, right. I hope you're talking about the hot dogs that they sell at the
Well, that sounds good. Yeah, they sell them at certain ballparks.
That's right.
Hey, Vaughn, where can people find the IATDG online and where can people find your organization, CE Tours?
Well, CE Tours is cetours.com or cetours.net. Both go to the same site. And IATDG is IATDG.org. We are online and we are, again, as you mentioned, having our conference, I think the week after the NAI conference. So to your people, yep, absolutely. If you have the time and the availability, we'd love to have you. You already have some of the qualifications to be a tour director. We would get you trained, we would get you connected. That'd be great. And for our people who are listening, if you have the time and the availability before the conference, you should absolutely meet me down in Virginia Beach. Karen and I will be there at the NAI conference, and you can learn more about interpreting and how to level up your skill and be a better tour director. I think it'd be great for both.
This episode will drop November 6th, which is the week before the NAI conference. So come check out IATDG at the NAI conference. And then, yeah, the following week, IATDG will be in Baltimore. We'll be eating crab cakes, hitting the
Absolutely.
Wawa. It's gonna be a great week. I look forward to hanging out with you in person, Vaughn. Finally, we love to do that. And
Absolutely.
and I'll run these ideas past you more. I've got a lot more ideas about my get rich quick post retirement plans here.
Oh, we'll flush them out and we'll get them right, man. We're on the right track. We are on the right. I think we just got to get a little bit more. We got to narrow that market a little bit
A
even
little bit
Pickleball.
more.
more. French
Pickleball.
speaking minor league baseball
I
fans is
think I
not
think
quite
it's pickleball.
Yes,
pickleball.
absolutely. And interpreters?
That's what's up.
What's up.